Look at this image. Don't just glance at it. Look at the data on the screen. This isn't a reproduction. This isn't a digital rendering. This is raw optical data from the Regio V sector of Pompeii. Excavation date December 26, 2020. The world was in lockdown, so you probably missed this. But while we were inside, archaeologists were brushing away 2,000 years of volcanic lapilli to reveal something that shouldn't look this new. Look at the pigment. That yellow is Pompeian ochre. Vivid, screamingly bright. Look at the fresco painted on the front. A nereid riding a seahorse, a rooster, a mallard duck. These aren't just decorations, they are a menu. You are looking at a counter, a literal service counter. See these large circular holes carved into the stone. They aren't for decoration. They are for dolia, massive, heavy ceramic jars embedded deep into the masonry to keep contents hot for 12, maybe 14 hours a day. This isn't a temple. It's not a house. This is a high-volume commercial distribution point. This is a drive-through. But here's where the history books lied to you. We are told the Roman Empire was built on discipline, order, and slow, lavish banquets. We are shown images of senators reclining in white togas, eating grapes, debating philosophy in the triclinium. That is the Hollywood Rome. That is the lie. Because when the team led by Massimo Asana scraped the bottom of those jars, they didn't find grapes. They didn't find exotic pheasant. They didn't find the clean, civilized diet of a superior empire. They found something that changes the entire timeline of human nutrition. Look at the spectroscopy report. They found traces of pork, fragments of duck bone, goat, fish, snails, all mashed together in a single vessel. Stop and think about the implications of that mixture. You don't mix fish, goat, and snail unless you are hiding something. This wasn't a gourmet meal. This was slop. This was a processed, high-calorie, mass-produced protein mash designed to be ladled out in seconds for copper coins. It was the ancient equivalent of a protein bar or a scrap meat hot dog, and it destroys the entire narrative of civilized dining. The narrative says Rome was a culture of slow food, family values, and agricultural purity. The data says Rome was a culture of hyper-efficiency and desperate speed. You don't build a counter like this for elites. Elites don't stand in the street to eat. You build this for a workforce that has no time to cook. You build it for a population that is running on fumes. And the sheer volume of these counters, over 150 documented in Pompeii alone, suggests a terrifying reality about the Roman economy. Nobody had time to stop. The Pax Romana wasn't powered by philosophy. It was powered by fast food. Official history tells us that the paterfamilias, the head of the house, was the center of Roman society. We are taught that the dinner table was sacred. Universities show us diagrams of villas with large kitchens, smoke vents, roasting spits, and pantries stocked with amphorae of olive oil. They paint a picture of self-sufficiency. A stable society where every man is a king in his own home, providing for his kin. But there is a massive statistical anomaly in that story. A mathematical impossibility. Look at the census estimates for Rome in the 1st century. 1 million people. Now look at the housing data. The vast majority of Roman citizens, up to 70%, didn't live in villas. They lived in insulae. Tenements, 6-story death traps made of timber, mud brick, and rubble. And here is the terrifying detail the guidebooks leave out. Here is the structural fact that forces the population into the street. The insulae had no kitchens. None. Most didn't even have a hearth. Think about the logistics. You live on the 4th floor of a wooden box. There is no running water. There is no chimney. Lighting a fire to boil a pot of lentils isn't cooking. It is suicide. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD proved exactly how flammable these districts were. So, if you can't cook at home, where do 800,000 people eat every single day? They didn't eat at home. They ate here. They ate at the Thermopolium. Rome wasn't a city of homemade meals. It was a city of 150 fast food joints per square mile. It was a calorie delivery system, but that's not the scary part. The scary part is what they were hiding in the sauce. Go back to the chemical analysis of the jars in Regio V. Archaeologists found crushed fava beans mixed into the wine jars. Now, the official explanation, the one you'll hear on a museum tour, is that it was used to modify the taste. That is a polite way of saying fraud. The real explanation? Fava beans were used to bleach the wine, to alter the color, to take cheap, oxidizing red swill and make it look like premium vintage. They were cutting the product with fillers. They were hacking the food supply. And then there's the garum. You cannot talk about Roman fast food without talking about the chemical weapon known as garum. It is found in almost every dish in these counters. Fermented fish intestines, salt, and sunrot, liquefied into a pungent sauce. Why was it everywhere? Was it just for flavor? No. When you were serving mass-produced meat that has been sitting in a warm ceramic pot for 6 hours in the Italian heat, you need something to mask the smell of decay. You need a masking agent. The Thermopolium wasn't a restaurant. It was a biological gamble. And the evidence suggests that the Roman state knew exactly how dangerous this was. Because when you look at the legal codes, the emperors weren't celebrating these places. They were terrified of them. The data density in Pompeii is overwhelming. Stop looking at the statues. Look at the grid. We are talking about 150 locations. 150 Thermopolia in a city with a population of maybe 12,000 people. Do the math. That is one fast food outlet for every 80 citizens. That is a higher density of fast food than New York City in 2024. It is higher than Tokyo. This wasn't a convenience. This was a biological necessity. And we have the receipts to prove exactly what they were buying. We have the Apicius manuscript, De Re Coquinaria. Book 2, Chapter 1. The recipe is titled Essencia Aumentata. Listen to the chemical breakdown. Minced meat. Soaked in white wine. Structured with pine nuts. Spiced with whole peppercorns. Bound together. Formed into a patty. Cooked over an open flame. It is a burger. There's no other word for it. A processed, portable, high-calorie meat patty designed for a human being who needs to eat while walking. The Romans didn't invent the concept of the patty because they were culinary geniuses. They invented it because of physics. You can stack them, you can cook them fast, you can sell them faster, but the archaeological record shows something else. Something the recipe book leaves out. The bread. We found carbonized loaves at Herculaneum, circular, scored into 8 wedges. Panis quadratus. This wasn't artisan baking. This was industrial production. Thousands of identical loaves stamped with the baker's mark like a serial number. Property of seller. Property of Modestus. Standardized nutrition for a standardized workforce. Look at the bees. They live a honeyed life. This wasn't just a place to eat. This was a network. These were the unmonitored hubs of the city, and that is exactly why the state tried to destroy them. We have a specific timeline of suppression. The Roman emperors, the most powerful men on earth, were cooked meat and hot water. Think about that. An imperial decree banning hot water. It sounds insane. It sounds petty. Until you realize what they were actually targeting. They weren't trying to stop people from eating. They were trying to stop people from gathering. The Thermopolium and its seedier cousin, the Pompeii, were the only places in the city where the lower classes could meet without supervision. No guards. No masters. No census takers, just cheap wine, hot food, and silence. The Roman historian Suetonius tells us, yes, that Nero enforced even stricter lockdowns. He forbade the sale of any food except vegetables and greens. Why? To kill the lingering time. If you can't buy meat, you don't stay. If you don't stay, you don't talk. If you don't talk, you don't plot. The state was trying to perform social engineering through the menu. They wanted the workers to eat and leave, fuel up, and get back to work. Any socialization was seen as a threat to the imperial cult. The elite writers of the time, Juvenal, Horace, Cicero, they all use the same language to describe these places. They don't call them restaurants. They call them filthy. They call them greasy. They sneer at the clientele. Thieves, sailors, runaway slaves, and executioners. This is the pattern of silence. The upper class, the people writing the history books, hated the Thermopolium. They saw it as a cancer, a place where the social order dissolved, where a slave with a coin was treated the same as a freeman with a coin. The receipts show us a thriving economy of the people. The official records show us a dangerous underworld that needed to be crushed. And the emperors knew that if they lost control of the food supply, they lost the city. But the suppression failed. We know it failed because the archaeology doesn't lie. We see layers of renovation. We see fresh frescoes painted over old ones in Regio V right up until the eruption in 79 AD. Despite the bans, despite the fines, despite the imperial guards marching down the Decumanus Maximus, the counters stayed open. The people refused to cook at home. This brings us to the terrifying realization about the Roman economy. It was fragile, far more fragile than the marble columns suggest. The existence of 150 fast food joints in Pompeii proves that the average Roman citizen was living on the razor's edge of time and energy. They were time poor. Just like us, they were working multiple jobs. They were living in spaces too small to sustain life. They were entirely dependent on a commercial supply chain for their basic survival. And the emperors knew that this dependency was a double-edged sword. If the grain ships from Egypt were late, the Thermopolia would go empty. And if the Thermopolia went empty, those 800,000 people living in the tenements wouldn't just be hungry. They would be together, in the streets, angry, and already organized. The Thermopolium was the flashpoint. It was the nerve center of the Roman mob. And that is why the government tried to regulate the menu. Control the calories, control the population. But there is one final piece of data from the excavation that changes everything. Something found in the dolia that wasn't food. Something that suggests the people weren't just eating there. They were hiding something. Look at the skeleton found in the back room of the Thermopolium. A man in his 50s. And look at what was found near him. Not a spoon, not a bowl, but a lid used to seal the jars. Why would you seal a jar of hot stew? You wouldn't, unless the jar wasn't holding stew anymore. The skeleton found in the back of the shop changes the entire profile of the crime scene. He wasn't a customer. He was found near the bed. He was likely the owner. And he wasn't fleeing. While the sky turned black and pumice rained down at a rate of 6 inches per hour, he stayed. Why? To protect the jars. Because the evidence suggests that the Thermopolium wasn't just a place to buy duck and goat mash. It was the dark web of the Roman street. It was the only place where the unbanked, undocumented population of Rome could store value. We found keys. We found silver. We found jewelry stashed in the voids of these counters. This is the uncomfortable truth that the marble statues hide. The Roman Empire was a surveillance state. Every transaction in the forum was taxed. Every movement was watched. But here, in the steam and the noise of the fast food joint, the state went blind. The Thermopolia were the nodes of a black market economy that the emperor couldn't touch. And that is why the elite hated them. They weren't afraid of the food. They were afraid of the freedom. But there is a much darker implication here, one that reaches out across 2,000 years and touches us right now. Look at the dependency. We have proved that 70% of the population could not cook for themselves. They lacked the infrastructure. They lacked the tools. They lacked the wood. They had outsourced their biological survival to a commercial vendor. They had traded autonomy for convenience, and that works fine. It works perfectly. Right up until the moment the mountain explodes, or the grain shipment from Egypt sinks, or the aqueduct breaks. The moment the just-in-time delivery system failed, Pompeii didn't just starve, it panicked. The people in those tenements were helpless. They had forgotten how to survive. They were the most advanced civilization on Earth, yet they were less capable of feeding themselves than a hunter-gatherer in the Iron Age. Progress had made them fragile. This brings us to the terrifying paradox of the Roman fast food network. We look at these counters and we see modernity. We say, wow, they were just like us. That shouldn't make you smile. That should make you sweat. Because the data presents two terrifying options for what actually happened to the Roman soul. Option 1. The trap of comfort. The Thermopolium was a pacifier. By giving the people cheap, processed, hot food, the emperors bought their silence. It was the bread and circuses strategy, refined into a daily caloric dose. The people didn't revolt against the terrible living conditions in the insulae because they were full. They were sedated by the convenience. They ate the lead-sweetened wine, they ate the mystery meat, and they stayed in their boxes. Convenience is the enemy of revolution. Option 2. The fragility of complexity. The Roman Empire didn't fall because of barbarians at the gates. It fell because it became too complex to manage. When you have a city of 1 million people who cannot boil their own water, you have built a machine that cannot be turned off. One disruption in the supply chain triggers total collapse. The Thermopolium is the symbol of that fragility. It represents a society that has severed its connection to the land, a society that lives entirely on the grid. And when the grid goes down, the civilization vanishes in 72 hours. The people of Pompeii died with coins in their pockets, waiting for a service that was never coming back. Now, look away from the screen. Look at your own kitchen. Look at your fridge. How much of what is in there is raw ingredients, and how much of it is prepackaged, processed, ready-to-eat fuel? If the power went out tonight, if the Uber Eats drivers stopped driving, if the supermarkets didn't get their truck tomorrow, how long would you last? Are you a self-sufficient human being, or are you a Roman citizen living in a tenement waiting for the ladle to dip into the jar? The archaeology proves that fast food isn't a modern invention. It is a symptom of an empire in its final frantic stages. It appears when a society becomes too busy to live. We are walking the exact same path. We are eating the exact same slop, and we are trusting the exact same fragile system. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. And I want you to be honest. If the supply chain breaks, tomorrow if the Thermopolium closes, do you have the skills to feed yourself? Or are you just waiting for the volcano? Type I'm ready or I'm Roman below. Let's see how fragile we really are.